Good morning. Good morning. I'm going to do it just one more time. Good morning. Good morning. Okay. Good morning. Thank y'all for being here this morning. Before we get started, I just want to let you know that we're actually going to spend some time engaging with one another. And so, this may sound silly, but you're going to like it, I promise. When I say waterfalls, that means I'm trying to get your attention back on me. And when I say waterfalls, y'all are going to do this. Shh. Right? It's a lot nicer than having 60, 70 people going, shh, be quiet, right? So let's practice. Talk to your neighbor. Waterfalls. Oh my gosh. You guys are awesome. We don't even have to do it twice. So if you came here this morning wanting to hear me talk about my work as an organizer, wanting me to go in depth about my work as an organizer, you're in the wrong place. So I'll give you some time if you want to leave. But if you came here this morning with an open heart, the willingness to experiment, the willingness to be uncomfortable, and the willingness to walk out of this space ready to experiment and take a risk, you're in the right place. Now, I could stand up here for 20 minutes and try to convince you to join the fight to end money bail. I could stand up here and try to convince you that ICE is a government-funded gang that kidnaps people from their homes. I could break out my big curriculum that is organizing one-on-one, and we can go through that for 20 minutes, but what would you leave here with? Now, by all means, if those are the things that you're interested in, we can go to coffee, we can go to dinner, we could talk about it. I have a toolkit, I have curriculums, I got you, but not right now. This morning, I want to spend some time talking about radical imagination, and you're going to walk away with a lot of questions because we only have 20 minutes. That's okay. Here in Asheville, we spend a lot of time talking about justice and racial equity, and we sit in a lot of circles, and we do a lot of talking, and people do a lot of crying about their privilege. We flock to UNC Asheville and malaprops just to listen to people who have written incredible books about what we need to do to shift our culture. We host panel discussions, and we listen to people pour out their trauma only to pat them on the back and say, "You're so brave." But where is our practice? How much more data do we need before we start trying something new and just start experimenting? Radical imagination. I find that we often limit our imagination because it doesn't fit into a certain box, because it isn't as refined as we'd like it to be, and because we're afraid of what the people around us will think. Radical imagination is just that, imagining in a radical way. It means imagining, envisioning the world that we actually want to create. For example, when I say I believe in a world without police, without ICE, and without sanctioned violence, what I mean is I believe in a world where we can heal as individuals and as communities so that we have the ability to build deep relationships, to move through conflict and trauma. It means I believe in a world where humans have access to shelter, to food, and healthcare that isn't rooted in Western practices. It doesn't mean that I believe in a world without consequences. However, it does mean that I believe in a world where we stop arresting our problems away. So, for those of you who are able and would like to, when I say the word liberation, you're going to gather all your things and you're going to go sit by someone you don't know. Liberation. Waterfalls. I'm going to say it one more time. Waterfalls. If you feel comfortable and you would like to, please close your eyes. I want you to think of those things that set your heart on fire. Think about those things that keep you up all night, those things that you are totally fine with losing sleep over. Think about the thing that you deeply wish existed in our world, or that you deeply wished no longer existed. If that thing did or didn't exist, what would our world smell like? What would our world feel like? What would our world sound like? Open your eyes. When I say the word liberation, you and your new friend are going to have a conversation about what your world looks like, sounds like, and feels like. If you could create it, if you could vision what you want your world to be, what would it feel like, sound like? Who would be with you? What would you be doing? Would you be working a 9-to-5? Or would you be gardening? Right? So I'm going to give you a few minutes with your buddy to go ahead and start talking about that. Waterfalls. Waterfalls. Awesome. I hope your time with your buddy was great. Another challenge, should you choose to accept, before you leave this space, get the contact information for your buddy and schedule a coffee date. And when I mean schedule a coffee date, don't just say, it was nice talking to you, I'll call you. Like, actually pull out your calendar and put it on the calendar and do it. So, challenge, should you accept it? You don't have to, but you should. So I want to take a moment, and I want us just to yell out what some things were in our conversation. Maybe it was gardening, so then you yell out, gardening. What's in this world that you vision? Just yell it out. Thank you, y'all. When I vision the world that I want, I vision no cages. I vision a world where trans women are not murdered for simply existing. I vision a world with no borders. I vision a world where everyone has abundance. I vision a world where we have everything that we need to survive. I vision a world where people don't have to do desperate things because they're hungry. I vision a world where children can be innocent children. I vision a world where children can just laugh and play and be free without adults interfering and telling them to stop being free, sit down, don't be loud. How beautiful would it be if we just let our kids be kids, right? And I know what you're thinking. You had me sit here and do this activity and tell this random person about my vision, but what is the how? How do I get there? How do I get to that? How do I make sure this is in my community? What are we going to do? How do I turn this into a reality? Well, you've got to just try some shit. So you have to experiment. Radical imagination. 2 years ago, a lot of organizers were like, cash, money, bail, and pretrial detention are impacting our lives. The co-director of Song, Mary Hooks, who I know most of y'all should know, was like, what if we try something? And we're like, what if we try what? She's like, what if we just bail Black mamas out of jail for Mother's Day? We were like, we know the issue of money bail is impacting us, but we got to do something now. We have to experiment. And because we experimented, over 400 Black mothers are no longer sitting in a cage. I'm going to say that again because I don't know if you know how important that is. Over 400 Black mothers are no longer sitting in a cage. Now, that isn't to say that there weren't obstacles, because there were. We learned a lot of lessons from our first bailout. A lot of lessons. We don't know it all, and we're learning as we go. But what we do know is that we have to experiment and that we have to just do something. It's not enough to sit in circles and talk about our visions and make vision boards and drink mimosas. We have to actually do something. It's not going to be perfect. It's going to be hard, but we have to do it. And I know some of you are like, well, when I think about prison abolition, that's too big of a concept. Like, are we ever going to get there? And I think of the people who believed that chattel slavery would be abolished in this country. They were told it's never going to happen. Some of the things that they did was they fought back. They ran away. They escaped. They experimented. They said, we don't see this vision right now, but we know we have to do something first. We have to do something. Radical imagination. So I know the theme of this morning is justice, and I know I'm not allowed to define the word justice, but Justice is radical imagination. Justice isn't just sitting in a room and talking about our problems and crying about our problems. Yes, we need to process, we need to cry, we need to be upset, and we also need to get up and do something and experiment. And so I challenge all of you, when you leave this space, to experiment. Even if no one believes in you, if no one wants to ride this train with you, experiment. The power of experimenting. We now have 2 presidential candidates who are running on platforms to end money bail across the country should they be elected. Because organizers on the ground, formerly incarcerated people, queer and trans people, experimented. Your experiment is powerful. Your radical imagination is powerful. So like I said, my challenge to you is just experiment. Thank you.